So I can tell you from my experience, after the discovery of deceptive sexuality or infidelity, most couples get that disclosure piece wrong. They either stagger out that truth over time, which causes more trauma, or they just avoid it completely, which really makes true intimacy almost impossible. So, today we're going to talk about the disclosure process. And I have an incredible guest today. His name is Dan Drake. He is the founder of the Banyan Therapy Group and is author of the Full Disclosure Workbook series, which is an incredible resource for this process. He's an expert in sex addiction and betrayal trauma. And I'm excited to have this conversation with him today. We're going to talk about three main points here. First, we're going to look into Dan's model of the pyramid of intimacy and why disclosure and the truth is so important for healing, and that sometimes it's the deception that is more damaging than the truth itself. And the next part we're going to go into is something that we often hear, and that's that question of, isn't this going to make it worse for them? And we talk about how often that's the person who's done the deception, their own shame and self-protection, that often gets in the way of this process, and how that deception is often more damaging than the truth itself. And then finally, we're going to talk about what is a therapeutic disclosure and what makes this disclosure process therapeutic versus just a staggered confession of the facts, and why it's important to take the time to work through this and do this in a guided way, especially to avoid any minimization of the truth or gaslighting or blame shifting, and why that part is so important. And I'm going to be adding my own insights into this conversation because this part is so important to move from that shame to that resilience. So let's jump into this episode. All right, everybody, welcome. I have an incredible guest today, Dan Drake, and we are going to talk about, I think, one of the biggest topics in betrayal trauma, or a big part of betrayal trauma, and that's disclosure. And so, Dan, we got a big topic to talk about today, but I want you to first introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll go into all the questions.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Dwayne. It's really good to join you. So I'm Dan Drake, and I am based in Southern California as well. So I'm down here, and Banyan Therapy Group, and primarily work with sex addiction, betrayal trauma. But that, several years ago, Janice Caldwell and I put together these disclosure workbooks, and I think they were a labor of love for a number of years. But I feel like what we tried to do is not try to say this is the way to do disclosure. It's more, here's the different choice points along the way, and how does each, because every couple's unique, how do we work with each couple in front of us and get the best disclosure experience that each couple's going to need specifically for their case. So that's kind of I'm honored to join you with disclosure, and let's go there. It's a huge one. It's a big topic. Obviously, it's a really tricky one.
Yeah, let's jump in. So for someone out there, maybe they're just in the midst of discovery, right? They've discovered infidelity in their relationship, some kind of betrayal. They may not even think about disclosure. What does that mean? Like, what are you talking about? I don't even understand that. And why would I want to do something like that?
Well, on which side are we talking about? On the addict side?
Well,
Betrayer or the betrayed?
Well, for both, really. Like, for the relationship, I would say,
Okay.
why in healing a relationship should we do a disclosure, and what does that mean?
Yeah, I guess that's a really, really great place to start, because what's the whole point of it in the first place? I mean, you'll get, and I think that's a good point, because you'll get people that, especially if you talk to friends or loved ones, everyone's got an opinion about what you should do, shouldn't do. There's a lot of different things you can read and hear out there. I think I would boil it down to a concept that I thought about, and then Janice and I put in our workbooks, is a pyramid of intimacy. And if we can just start with that, if can I go through that real quick?
Yeah,
kind of
go
work
for
back
it.
downwards. Okay, so I was thinking about I was thinking about this question a number of years ago. Like, what's the point of disclosure, and how does it fit in intimacy rebuilding for couples? After betrayal, that was kind of the main thinking. And I thought, okay, if at the apex of a pyramid is intimacy, if that's what our goal is in a relationship, underneath that we need vulnerability to have intimacy. You can't have intimacy without vulnerability.
Right.
Because if that classic definition of intimacy is into me see or into me you see, there's vulnerability. What I think many of us take for granted in a relationship is what's underneath vulnerability. Vulnerability without, we need trust underneath vulnerability to let ourselves be seen and known, and we need safety to let ourselves feel trust. And so I think safety and trust allow for vulnerability. So those are now the steps underneath vulnerability. What I think, at least I took for granted, I think many of us take for granted in a relationship, is that the person that I'm with, that I'm partnered with, is honest with me. They are who they say
Right.
they are. So I think at the foundation of the whole pyramid is honesty based on truth. So what happens after discovery is honesty completely crumbles. We realize, oh, this person I thought I was partnered with, married to for months, years, decades, is not this person. They're not. There's more to the story. They're not the person I thought they were. So, to me, the whole point of disclosure is trying to rebuild that foundation of honesty and rebuild the truth in the relationship. Because without it, the whole intimacy, everything crumbles. There's no safety. There's no trust. Vulnerability gets walled off. We don't have intimacy again. So, the whole thing erodes. We have a whole relationship crumbling. So disclosure is about a way to kind of rebalance and rebuild and get a new foundation for the relationship.
It's like a shattering of the reality.
The whole thing.
Once you
Yeah.
get this new information that you didn't know was there, and then it just blows everything up, and then you don't know what's real
Right.
anymore. I was also thinking about if you don't have some kind of shared reality, like we both agree that this is our reality, it becomes really hard for a couple to work on that because nothing's safe. You don't know what the reality is. And then also, I was going to say one more thing. How can you consent to a relationship that you don't know what the relationship is?
What is it? What was it? Who are you? Who were you? Like, I think those big questions. Most partners I've ever heard about, talked to, they look what was happen, look back through old photos and see what was real, what wasn't. Was it all a lie? So yeah, we have to figure out is there anything salvageable about that old relationship, let alone who are we and what are we going to become? So disclosure is basically a rebalancing that, where the betraying person shares the history of the betrayal, what was kept secret from their betrayed partner.
And it puts it out all on the table. But I think a key point in what you're talking about is it's done in a particular way.
Right.
Therapeutically. Can you talk a little bit why that is so important? Because sometimes when I think people just hear disclosure, yeah, I told my partner the truth. I told him, I said, yeah, this is what happened. But a therapeutic disclosure is a little bit different.
It's a lot different. And even in those best case scenario, the person was forthright and they shared everything to begin with and they weren't defensive. They shared all the truth, and they shared everything the betrayed partner wanted to know. And it was, done not coercively. They were able to share it. That's not generally the case. We call those staggered confessions. It's usually we see a series of those things where the betrayed partner, there's some discovery, and it's not all the information. Usually it's some piece of it, and the betrayed partner will ask certain questions, and they'll kind of have to drag a bunch of information, and then it's shared, but then there's more. So that's you could call that a disclosure, but those are staggered disclosures or confessions. That's not what we're talking about is a process where the betraying person they literally write out their timeline, their history. They think through it chronologically. What was I doing? What were the behaviors? They do a thorough investigation of what did I do, and they present it in a way that's digestible for the partner, that gives all the information the partner needs, without giving too much, without giving too little. So yeah, it's done therapeutically with preparation for both people, actually.
Yeah, to mitigate any more trauma as much as possible, but also get to the truth or that shared reality. What about, a lot of people will say when they hear this, might say, well, I'm just, you know what, I'm just going to hurt my partner more. And so I should just, I'll just keep these secrets because, I don't want to hurt my partner. I don't want to cause more pain.
Yeah, I hear that a decent amount. And people will sometimes, if someone has a 12-step background, there is that phrase in the ninth step where it says something, I'm not going to quote it correctly, but it's something like, we made direct amends to those we had harmed, except when to do so except when to do so cause harm to them or to others, right? And so they say, well, why would I share all this stuff to my partner? Because this stuff is going to damage my partner. They're going to be, traumatized by this, or I'm going to hurt them. And I guess there's two things I would say. I don't know what you'd say too. It's true. It's true. The information will hurt. It will potentially harm. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. What I would say though is there's a few things I'd say. What we do know from at least the research that we've done from the betrayed partner experience, generally it's not the information that's what kills the relationship. It's usually the consistent, continued deception and lies that I see kill relationship or erode. What when a partner says I can't do this anymore, it's not usually because of what's shared in the disclosure. It's usually because of what happens through the disclosure process or after. It's the continued lies. So that's what I continue to see. That's what the most harm is.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point because if you're the person who's done the if you're the person who's done the betrayal and you're keeping those secrets, right? And your partner's in trauma, they're going to be asking questions. You're going to have to continue to lie to them, to gaslight them. All that abusive behavior is going on in the background, right. And you can't get to that pyramid of intimacy like you were saying if that's the case. So you have to put that all out on the table for, I think, the opportunity for the relationship to heal on a deep level.
And I think to that point, because sometimes, and I usually try to challenge, especially it's usually from the betraying person's side that says that. They'll say some version of that, it's going to harm them, so I shouldn't share it. I usually try to get underneath it because yes, I'm thinking about my partner, but more often what I hear when someone's using that, it's usually because I'm really scared of sharing this information. It's right. I don't think my relationship could recover. I couldn't imagine, maybe I already have these negative core beliefs about myself. I couldn't imagine someone staying with me after I did these things to somebody else. So I think it's oftentimes self-protection. Rather than protection of the partner that leads to those questions. Not always, but sometimes.
Absolutely. I think that's I hear that a lot too, where it's like it really like I don't want to hurt them, but it's really about me. I don't want to share. I have too much shame. I have too much guilt. I'm afraid I'm going to lose the relationship, so I'm just going to hold on to this even tighter. And I think you're right. That leads to more of those lies and that long-term damage to the relationship.
And if someone could paint me a picture of how you get to true intimacy with continued deception and lies, I would love to know. I haven't seen it, but if someone has a model for that, I'm all ears. I just haven't seen it.
I haven't either. I don't know how you do that either, but I think for a lot of people who've done the betrayal, they've grown up in deceptive relationships and deceptive family dynamics where secrets are the norm and actually don't know what it's like to live in a transparent relationship.
Well, transparency may be threatening. It may, if I shared
absolutely.
And I think of all those negative core beliefs we can come to believe about ourselves. I'm unlovable, I'm defective, I'm unworthy, I'm bad, I'm all those kind of negative core beliefs. And if I show my true self, I'll be rejected, abandoned. I won't make it. And maybe that was true, like you said. Maybe there was a situation or family upbringing that I couldn't show my true self because if I did, I would have been, rejected or I wouldn't have survived. Like that's definitely the reality for a lot of our clients. So
yeah.
But again,
and it goes to that vulnerability piece, right? Where I think if we are our true selves, right, we always risk rejection. That's part of intimacy is that vulnerability piece, meaning here I am, will you accept me as I am? Mm-hmm. And sometimes some people will and sometimes some people won't. That's the reality. But you can't have deep relationships I believe, built on, like you said, deception, untruth, lack of transparency. It's that ultimate loneliness in a way.
Well, and if I have to curate a version of myself to be loved by you, I mean, this gives a chance to be truly seen, truly known, truly loved. Yes, it's scary, it's terrifying, and
Yeah.
especially after doing behaviors that have harmed. But that's the most beautiful thing about being able to share yourself with someone else, is that they can choose to say, "And I still love you. You're flawed, and I love you."
Yeah.
Might be challenging and might have work to do, but I mean, that's to be truly loved, not to be lonely because I'm only giving you a part of myself to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Switching gears, what about the betrayed partner? When do they need to do this disclosure? And what are some of the hurdles that they face when they start to walk through this process?
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen. I'm sure you've seen it too. I've noticed a shift in our field. We used to wait a lot longer in disclosures back in the day.
Yeah.
We used to
Yep.
wait a while because typically the addict or the betrayer, they're not ready yet. And that's true. Probably meaning they're not mature enough. They not just that can they share the truth, but they don't quite get it yet. They don't have the kind of sobriety or recovery under their belt. I think we tend to shift earlier now, to doing disclosure sooner, because and this actually carries out in the workbooks we did. Janice Caudill put out a survey, and there were three moments that we're testing. So one was level of distress from 0 to 10 of what discovery was, and then 0 to 10 what disclosure was for the betrayed partner.
Hmm.
Level of distress. Discovery was like 9.7 or 9.6. It's 9.7, I think. It was devastating, as you can imagine. It's about as high as you can imagine. Disclosure was
Yeah.
about 7 point, I don't know, 7 point something, 7.7 maybe, 7.5. Still pretty bad. Like you can see distress level for disclosure is pretty high. The wait time between discovery and disclosure, though, when that was tested, that was a 9.2 for the betrayed partner.
Wow.
Yeah. And that
Wow.
surprised me the most, that, okay, so the numbers I think of who've taken this on the betrayed partner side is over 1,000 now. So there's over 1,000 people who have corroborated that their wait time. So when's the right time to do this? I don't know. There's some zone we can't wait long enough for the betrayer to kind of get it. We can't do it soon enough for the partner. So
Yeah.
I think there's a point where, if I just discover that the world I thought I had been living in and the person I thought I had been partnered with is now something, it's completely different. I don't even know what that is. That person's free falling. So I think we try to stop the free falling and, build a new foundation as quickly as we possibly can with as safe as we can possibly do it.
Yeah, and I was going to say too that when the partner, when this disclosure is delayed, um, oftentimes the nervous system starts to settle, right? They actually start kind of bonding again and starting to feel
Hmm.
safe, and then all of a sudden you have this huge rupture again, and I think that causes more damage if we wait longer
Right.
too, and that's what I've also seen. So I'm usually encouraging couples to do this as quickly as possible, but also therapeutically and thoroughly. And you're right. There's this balancing act
Hmm.
there of where everybody is, and I think too, taking into account like a therapeutic disclosure and why you need support to do that is you need to help to balance all that out,
Right.
because there are situations where maybe a disclosure is not appropriate if someone is really acute and really overwhelmed and doesn't have any support, and we have to be really, really careful. And that's why you want some professional
Hmm.
guidance with people who have experience
Yeah, 100%.
doing this.
Yeah, and I think that nails what you said earlier too. That point that doing this doing this on your own, people do it, but even the workbooks we created, we're meant to be done with guidance, because there's just so many different nuances, ways that we can support people, our experience that helps us to guide them, but also hold space when they're actually sharing this together, that it's done thoroughly with as much compassion and care for the process as possible.
Yeah, and I would say too that another thing that comes up for me as we're talking is that the betrayer often doesn't realize all the information they really need to share to get to that
Right.
transparency. Because they'll come in, I've said everything, I've already said everything. And it's like they don't realize, like, well, probably not. And we don't want any surprises to pop up down the road either after you've built trust.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's the thing about this. And I sometimes use this as an example, or, if I have a cancerous tumor, you don't want to get 99% of the tumor. You want to get 100%
Yeah.
of it. And 99% is pretty good, but nobody with cancer would say, okay, that's good enough. Let's stay there. Like, no, we need to get it all, because this is, what happens with that extra 1%, and this is the thing I don't think many addicts I've worked with quite understand. They think maybe I told a lie this one time, and they think of it in the past tense. What I've seen from the betrayed partner's perspective is every day that you withheld this information, every day that you lied about this, every day that goes by is a lie. And that could be years that potentially go by before the partner discovers this. And that foundation that you talked about that gets rebuilt, that just comes crumbling, because then the partner says, wait, you knew about this and you held it back for 3 years? We're not just at a zero again, we're negative. Like, this foundation just crumbles again.
Yeah, and that's so hard to see happen too. And it's like part of doing a therapeutic disclosure is, preventative of that possibility,
Right.
and really moving healing forward. Because I think once that disclosure's done, there's this, I guess you could call it a base on which to build, and healing becomes for everybody. I don't know what the right word is. Healing becomes real. I don't know if that's the right word, but it becomes solid. It
Yeah.
becomes like this is a genuine. Everybody knows everything, and it actually allows the nervous system start to settle for both people, the betrayer and the betrayed.
Right.
That's what I see.
Yeah, me too. 100%.
And I think that's really is supportive of them in this process, even though it's so incredibly difficult.
I wanted to say one thing as you were saying that, because it's so incredibly difficult, and because there's so much involved. I've had to learn. I've learned this the hard way, I'll say. I've learned that the person who's preparing the disclosure, the disclosing person, they have to know. You have to know that it's a huge thing to do, but this is a new starting line for the relationship to rebuild. It's not the finish line. And I feel like
Yeah.
some people I've worked with, they're thinking, okay, whew, we jumped through that huge hurdle. Now we can breathe. Now we can kind of go back to, I did what you wanted. Now we can kind of go back to, the relationship we had. And that doesn't work that way. So I want to say it's a huge accomplishment, and this is a new foundation. This isn't we haven't rebuilt the house yet.
Yeah, you have to rebuild that house, and that's a lot of work. But then you have that solid foundation to do it,
Right.
and you can do it, because you just can't do it. Like you said earlier, we were both talking about, you can't do that if there's not transparency. It in my opinion, it's not a full relationship, and it doesn't seem to work. A question I get asked a lot is, how long does this process take? Can I just come in? All right, I'm coming to your office. Let's do disclosure this week, and let's get it done. We'll do it in this session.
If you
I
can
know
do
the
that,
answer, but
great. I mean, if someone can do that, I'll say generally for me, it takes me about 6 to 8 weeks to prepare somebody.
yeah, that's what I
Now,
found too.
I have done it. Some people that are prepared, they can take less and sometimes more. If someone's really, really motivated, I think it takes about that. Now, why would it take? I guess that's what are we doing during those 6 to 8 weeks? For me, part of it is in the partner's version of these workbooks, there's a needs assessment, and I found that really, really helpful, because the partner gets to determine what level of detail do I want? What are the partner's needs that they want from the disclosure
Yeah,
process? That way, if I'm preparing the disclosing person, I don't have to make that up. I think your partner would want to know this, or they would want to know this level of detail or not. They actually tell me, so I get to help the person prepare. But that takes a little time to sync up between the person who's preparing the partner and then me, if I'm preparing the disclosing person. But I think the main work I do along the way, because I do a written disclosure. I don't know how you do it, but I could do 10 plus edits or revisions of the document that they're creating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Easily.
Easily. And why do we need that? To me, that's the actual work, is when I'm seeing, sometimes big but sometimes subtle minimizations. I did
Yeah.
such and such behavior, but it was only twice. Okay,
Yep.
that might sound really subtle, but I'm going to take out, but it was only twice. And why? And then I'm going to talk to my client. When you say that, it's a way of, first I want to see what was going on. It's a way that I try to say, well, I did this thing, but it wasn't that bad. That's how the partner's going to hear it. So I'm working through those things. So there's editing, but there's also being able to kind of carry that into a session and process, like, what ways do I subtly or not so subtly blame shift or gaslight or rationalize or minimize or justify behaviors, or am I vague with some things? I'm really explicit in some areas and then I'm vague when I feel uncomfortable, or all those are part of the things that I'm going to be editing. So I mean, that's the rough guideline, but those are the things I think are really, really, really important, because that's how probably they show up with their relationship. If they're showing up in the
Right. So
document
there's
that way, then they're probably showing up that way, relationally.
right. So it's bigger than the document itself. It's also how, yeah, all of those kind of, I guess you could call them offending behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
minimizing, gaslighting, all that stuff is addressed in the document.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who's doing that, who's done the betrayal, might not realize they've done all that. I get that a lot. And like, nope, we've got to take that out.
Mm-hmm.
We really just want the truth. We want factual language without any of that unconscious spin on it to try and mitigate damage, just the truth for the partner. There was another piece I wanted to talk to you about, and I think is really, really important too. It's allowing the person who has been betrayed the ability to decide what they want to know,
Mm-hmm.
what's the right amount of information with some
Mm-hmm.
guidance. Because without that therapeutic experience of saying, is this information you really need to know? Is this going to help you? And partners have to walk through that process because they have to feel like they're getting what they need. But sometimes it can be like, oh, maybe that piece of information, I didn't really need to know that. It didn't help me. It's actually now caused me more harm.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a balancing act there.
Well, and I think it's such a good point, and doing that with guidance, because sometimes the need to know versus want to know, I think, is really critical. Or
Yeah.
let's say the betrayed partner has a really good question, but let's say it's a graphic detail question, and is there sometimes the guidance is there a is there another question underneath that question? Is there a
Yeah.
heart based question that's linked to something you're trying to find? you know, an answer to, how could you do this, and how could you love me and hurt me so deeply? Do you find me attractive? Do you love me? Are you committed to the marriage? Or whatever it is. There's these big questions. Who are you? Why did you do this? That you think asking a specific question might get to, but sometimes those aren't, they're more statements of grief and pain than they are, getting understanding, a real graphic level of detail, for example. So having guidance to see, is this the real question that you wanted to ask, or is there something underneath that may not get answered the way you're asking that particular question? And I think that's a really important part for the betrayed partner to then work through, and then see, okay, maybe this isn't going to be answered in disclosure, but that's a really big question that we want to address moving forward on an ongoing basis. Because if it's about, are you committed to me, and do you love me? Like, if those are the big questions that we want to know, it may not be answered by specific details in a disclosure, but we definitely want to explore those moving forward. Those are significant heart questions.
It's like the difference between the kind of fact-based questions and the process
Yeah,
questions.
exactly.
And the process questions are much more complicated and nuanced and harder to answer. Like, why did you do all this stuff? Right? For a betrayer, there's probably a multitude of reasons, and they haven't done the introspection to really understand their choices. So that would be really hard to answer in a disclosure. But the facts of, this is my
Mm-hmm.
behavior, and this is what I did, and this is what it is, and here's this part, I think that has to come in the disclosure, and sometimes being able to see those too, because for a partner, they want answers to it all, because they're in that crisis state of their shattered reality, and they're in trauma,
Mm-hmm.
And so having that guidance and support, I think, is really helpful. I have one question I think that comes up a lot is what do you see in couples after this process?
Oh.
And what's the line that goes for them? Because, how does that move through? And I'd love to hear your experience, and I'll share a little bit of my
Yeah, I'm
experience.
curious because
Post-disclosure.
I don't know that I have a unified experience of couples post disclosure, but what I will say, I have a colleague, Joy Reichenthal, who uses this example, and maybe others use it too, but she talks about, the after disclosure. It's like the betraying person after they've done the disclosing. It's like they had a backpack of pain and shame and all this stuff that they've been holding. And they're able to unburden themselves. They take off that backpack because, my typical experience from the betraying person's side, they feel two main things post-disclosure. It's relief. I shared everything. So there's some relief. Finally, I have no secrets. Maybe for the first time in my life, I have no secrets.
Yeah.
And then terror. They're really scared. Now what? What's my partner going to do with this? But that backpack that they unburden themselves with, now the betrayed partner has to hold, because it's this level. Now the betrayed partner now has to look through, okay, here I heard all this information. How do I process it? What was real? What do I make of all this? There's a lot of levels of, processing and grief that goes post-disclosure. So I usually, there's a period, I think of the immediate post-disclosure period. I think of it like a post-op, period after a major surgery. It usually is going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
I think just being prepared, it's going to be delicate. The betrayed partner, maybe they were in a different place in terms of boundaries, but the betrayed partner says some version of, I don't want you to touch me right now, period. Or initiate any kind of, I don't, if any kind of sexual contact I will initiate. Or there might be these boundaries that for right now, or we maybe even do a therapeutic separation of some kind post-disclosure. So sometimes there's that level of, I need some distance to process potentially, or at least some emotional space, and then we're going to come back together. Depending, every situation is different, but I see sometimes that at least the next, weeks to several months.
Yeah.
Post disclosure. After that, it's a different story. But I'm curious, what you see too.
Well, I think it's pretty similar. I mean, generally speaking, generally longer term, most people are very thankful that they did disclosure. Longer term, right?
Yeah.
But like you said, that immediate after, there's usually like that sense of relief for the betrayer. And then that other thing of, did I make the right decision to do this? And the conflict, and I think I made it worse. And they go through that, a couple weeks of that. But then once that starts to settle and they start to figure it out, I find that the majority of couples, I don't want to say appreciate the process. I don't know if that's the right word, but they feel it was the right decision and it was the right thing to do. And even the betrayer, usually what I see is when they, if they're in my support group or something like that, and they're talking to someone who's just coming in and they've got through that post-disclosure, they're pretty encouraging, like, you should do this. This is the right thing to do. But I think it's similar to your experience, Dan. And it's hard. It's just really, really hard.
It's hard, which is why having support through this, having a tribe of people that have either gone through it or that understand it, because it's so, even people that are in recovery meetings like 12-step, there's a lot of people that don't go through this formal process we're talking about, and they'll even maybe discourage someone from going forward, and they'll say that's too much and that's too damaging or something. So I don't see that. I actually think it's really what we're trying to do is clean out the cancerous tumor or the infected wound. We're really trying to do that to give the relationship the best chance to not just survive, but to actually, build and thrive as a result.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Absolutely.
that's what I've seen. And yeah, there was something you said, I just lost it, but I feel that post-disclosure period, I think is a really important period because now we're reestablishing what's this thing that we're going to rebuild from. And we have it all, everything's out on the table. To me, I guess I'm thinking intimacy pyramid. I'm really thinking now the next stage is safety rebuilding. So we're trying, okay, what does safety look like for this thing? How do we start to rebuild trust back? Those are the steps I'm thinking of. of post-disclosure moving and healing.
Yeah, and I think the betrayed partner, they get to really make a decision to stay or leave, right? That's based on truth, and they can truly consent to that. And if you're the betrayer and your partner decides to say, I think you decides to stay. I think you said this earlier. You have something truly unique there, and something to really build on. So I want to switch topics a little bit.
Yeah.
Before we started, I was talking about shame and how shame shows up in this process, and maybe how shame might end up sabotaging this process, and why that's a real important thing to look at. And also, I think the other part of that is how doing this process can actually help heal some of that shame. So I want to jump in there. I know
Yeah, well,
I know
right.
that's a
Huge.
huge topic, Dan. I just opened up a
But
huge
we've
window there, but I felt like it would
It's
just be
huge
interesting
though, and
to
I
talk
think we
about
have
that.
to address it because it's there, and that's where my heart is with anyone. And I we talked about how tough these were before we started too. These are tough to facilitate, and yet they're so powerful, and I see them as so sacred, and I see them take them so seriously, because what we're doing is we're saying, there's that saying, we're only as sick as our secrets. We're saying we're helping you facilitate a process of not having any secrets anymore, so that you can actually move forward, as a couple, as individuals, but as a couple, so that the partner can heal, because now they have the information. What am I dealing with? Because the reality is this: once there's discovery, you can opt out of doing a disclosure. That's an option. And it would, and say, oh, it would hurt you too much to know. But the betrayed partner is still going to be asking all those questions, and they'll never have answers. So their mind, they're still going to be spinning. They're not going to be moving forward.
Right.
So, I mean, there's still anyway. So I guess I see how valuable and powerful these things can be. So, by the way, we'll get to the shame in a second. I remember what I was going to say earlier on the outcome studies of disclosure. When we asked, did the benefits outweigh the harms of the disclosure? There's damage or potential harms. Right. This was surprising to me. It was on the betrayer side. They reported higher benefits of doing the disclosure than even the partner. They said, yes, the benefits outweighed the harms more positively. They endorsed it even than the partners did. And it was like, significantly high for everybody. So
Yeah.
I just have to say that. It might seem counterintuitive, but after the fact, I think for that reason is shame, go back to shame. Shame tells me, the message is, I am bad, I'm defective, I'm unlovable, all those negative core beliefs. I need to hide myself. I have to hide myself and curate myself to be loved, because if people really saw into me, there's no way they would love me. That's what shame tells me. So we're asking people, inviting people to do the opposite, is let's peer into those things, the things that you were going to take to the grave, the things that you were hiding because, they're dark and they're, difficult, and they may be painful or even disgusting for the betrayed partner to hear potentially. We're saying, and that sharing those things are actually going to heal the relationship. It doesn't make any sense. The shame says something completely opposite. It says, don't share that stuff because, you're a piece of nobody would love. So I think this whole process, it challenges us to confront the shame and say, no, actually shame is reinforced through hiding and secrecy. And it's actually through the sharing of this that we can actually heal and move forward. So I think we've kind of been talking about shame this whole time without using that word. That this is I think every week why I like to have as much time as I can to help the betraying person is to talk them off the ledge and help them move from hiding is the way I protect myself to disclosing is the way I actually preserve myself in my relationship. And that's a kind of whole fundamental shift that the person needs to make. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I was thinking, when I've done these disclosures, sometimes I'm the first person that this person, before their partner even, gets to hear the whole truth of their life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, this is a hard balance too, and I want to acknowledge this part, because this betrayal is so damaging for partners and so causes so much trauma that I want to make sure that any partner listening knows that I'm not dismissing that piece. But when the person who's done the betrayal can sit in that compassion and kindness to walk through it and be honest and be accountable, that's where healing
Yeah.
actually happens
Right.
for everyone. But I can understand, the person who's been betrayed, all the anger and rage. How could you be that to someone who's done such harm? But I think that's, healing that shame is part of that
Mm-hmm.
process.
Yeah. And moving from shame, and I think I missed this early on, and I think I put together shame. I'm sorry, I put together comfort and safety. So I think I did a disservice to clients where I was trying to make them too comfortable. So I think
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, almost like not giving them the opportunity to even challenge that the discomfort that the shame kind of voice tells. So like, okay, we'll back off. We won't go there. I won't push. But I think there's something about this is uncomfortable and it can be safe. Like we can build a safe space for this. And I
Yeah.
think that's important with disclosure. This is not an inquisition. This is not it's not the framework I try to bring is a sacred container that we're trying to build for a couple where they're coming in, and it's not about trying to have like we're lawyered up and it's we're firing
Yeah.
questions. It's trying to provide an opportunity that the betrayed partner deserves to hear the truth without a bunch of extra BS that goes with it, without a bunch of other rationalizations and distortions and anything. It's the full truth without fully taking responsibility, that they deserve to hear and understand the truth in a safe way, for both.
Yeah. And I think you're talking about what I see is healthy shame versus toxic shame.
Exactly. Yep.
We need some of that healthy shame when we've done something wrong to hurt other
Right.
people. We need to sit with that. And then there's this toxic shame, like you were saying earlier, of toxic shame on the self.
Right.
And I am unredeemable.
And thank you. I think that's such a good distinction, because I think there's a critique at a scene from the betrayed partner perspective that, oh, all we're doing is coddling the addict or coddling the betrayer, and not helping them stand in the truth of what they've done. And I think to some extent that has been true. I do think there are,
Yeah,
and
I
I've
think
done
there's
that. That's what I can say. I've done that. So I think that's that balance is, no, you need to step into the healthy shame or guilt or whatever we're going to call it, this place of, I need to own and take responsibility for what I've done and the harms that I've done. I have to stand in that and hold my inherent goodness. That cognitive dissonance is the hard part. Like I can be a good person who's done some really harmful things. And I'm going to try and hold that with the client. Betrayed partner, that's not for them to have to hold any of that right now at all. But that there's possible that, can we hold those two tensions that, am I completely flawed and defective because I've done these bad things? Or am I, whatever, I've done these harmful things, but that I can still retain dignity and try to be, my own self-worth and respect.
It's a balancing act. It really is. It's very nuanced, and that's why I think, once again, finding professionals that are trained in this, licensed in this, and know how to help and have the experience is so critical. I want to talk about another part here, because shame also shows up for the partner
I
who's been
was
betrayed.
just going to say that.
And I
Yeah.
want to address them.
Yep.
Because they sometimes either, take on the shame of what, here I'm with this person that did all this bad stuff. What does it say about me? I must be a horrible person, or broken or flawed to have, to not have seen this, all that stuff. So I'd love to kind of talk about that part.
I am so glad. Yeah, I was just thinking, yeah, and the betrayed partner has that shame potentially too, let alone, and I think this is, Esther Perel talked about this, the new scarlet letter that betrayed partners experience after infidelity is staying after infidelity.
Yeah.
There's this extra shame that society or friends or family can sometimes put on the betrayed partner to say, oh, I can't believe why would you even go through a disclosure? Why would you stay with this person after what they've done to you? And I hear this from partners even, today. I hear pretty commonly this extra, like, what is wrong with, this person did these things. I would never tolerate this. I didn't think I was the kind of person who would ever put up with anything like this, or I wouldn't want this for my daughter or for my friends. So why am I accepting it? So, which is just too much, there's so many reasons people stay. I just want to say that there's so many reasons, and it's
And I think the research actually shows that more people stay than leave,
yeah,
right?
and I and,
But I
and
think our culture, it's a cultural messaging. Like you don't, you gotta leave. That's what everybody would do.
And there's so many, again, like there's you have a relationship, you have history, there's attachment, there's all kinds of, there's maybe
Absolutely.
financial stuff or kids, or there's a lot of reasons. There's so many reasons, and I guess
A lot of those are really good
they're
reasons to
valid,
stay.
and like there's no, I think I'm a big believer that whatever that message is, that I have to make a decision right now. I think relieving the betrayed partner of that, let's, I think disclosure gives us information. So we have information that you can make better informed choices post disclosure. But I never, the stay or go question, I think putting that, like, you can choose to stay for today, and that's okay. That's okay. No judgment
Absolutely.
either way. Whatever you're choosing, and however, just make it, I want to make sure it's safe, but that's it. So I see that more, I see that often on the betrayed partner in terms of shame showing up. I'm sure you said another one. I forgot what you had said earlier, that the other ways that shame, I see that's the most consistent way I see shame showing up for partners. Were there other ways that you see shame showing up?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the shame of staying, and then the shame of, how did I not see
Oh,
this?
sure.
Like I should have seen it. It's so obvious now. Like how did I ignore it? How could I not honor myself? Right? I saw it before, but I ignored it, and all of that. I think that those are such hard things to wrestle with.
Sure.
But I think kind of going back to disclosure, reclaiming the truth helps everybody, because you get to stand in that space where the person who's done the betrayal, I think this is the beginning of them taking ownership and accountability, and you can see if they're going to do this,
Yeah.
right? If they're going to do this work, because if I want to say this part, if you're asking for a disclosure and your partner's not willing to do it, that's a piece of information that helps you also make that decision.
Yeah, because what that communicates to me, if I'm the betrayed partner, is I'm saying I need this for safety, to try to understand what I'm dealing with, to move forward and feel safe in this relationship. If the other person, the betrayer, opts out and says, no, I'm not going to do that, to me that says they're putting their own self-protection in front of safety and security for the partner of the relationship. I don't know another way to look at
Yeah.
it. It's saying no for whatever reason, but they're saying my safety is more important than yours. And whether that's what
Yeah.
they're meaning to communicate, I don't know how the betrayed partner doesn't take it that way. It doesn't feel that way. So, and I just, on your point about how did I not see this, or maybe I saw signs, I also want to, we can't, I love the concept of hindsight signs, that, all of our when we look back, our hindsight is 2020. We know, we see, okay, I can see it now. But don't forget, I think I can say every case, maybe you can correct me, but every case, if not every case I've ever worked with, there's going to be lies and deception and gaslighting and minimization. So you actually have a person
Absolutely.
on the other side distorting reality. So even if you're seeing it, you saw some things, you have someone else who's actively distorting reality at the same time. So now you can see it, and that's actually one big part of what disclosure does, is it helps to put partner intuition and say, you know what, on that one vacation when you just were acting in such and such way, and I just felt something was off, and you explained it away, and I was like, okay, but I knew something was up then, and that was when this thing happened. And there's something about them lining up their intuition with reality and saying, okay, you know what, you gaslit me during that time and made me think it was I was the one crazy, but actually you were acting out, and now I know it. And that's part of the healing, even as painful as that is. The partner matching their own intuition with reality starts to help their own healing, begin or continue. So I think that gives us hindsight signs, and no judgment for that either, because there's a lot of reasons why we don't
I'm
see
so
things.
glad you brought that point up, because that's another one of those benefits of disclosure, is reclaiming your reality, and getting that gut healing for the betrayed partner,
Right.
that they need to be able to do. So, Dan, I know we could go on and on. There's so much more about disclosure, because it is a really, really complicated process. But is there anything else you think we need to add to this conversation?
Uh, I think we've already said it, but I think just reiterating a couple things. One, do this with help and support. Don't do this on your own. And I just, again, anyone choosing even to consider this, I really want to acknowledge it because it's easy to hear our voices and say, oh, do it because we believe in it and it's powerful. But I know on the other end of that, like it's a walk of faith. There's a lot of it's difficult to do this. So I think I really want to honor anyone that's willing to do this because I think it's so powerful. It's such a gift for the relationship and it's so difficult and so scary. So anyway, for anyone that's in there really trying to decide, get some support and don't just take our words for it. Actually get other trusted people in your life who get this, who could speak into your life and your situation. I think this is valuable, but yeah, get some help and support.
And I'm just going to put this out there because you have an incredible workbook for this process. Working with you over this time, I've seen that workbook come from just some documents you handed out at a conference to a really good guide to do this process, which I would say, also best to do it with a professional, but it is a great guide for that. You want to just throw that out there so people can have that resource?
Yeah, so it's a little confusing. So if I can just take 2 seconds on that. So there's two workbooks on the betrayer side. One is I call it the big blue book, but it's called Full Disclosure: How to Share the Truth After Sexual Betrayal. There's a mini book that's basically how to write the document. So you don't need both of those. One's like a smaller book to prepare the document. One's more comprehensive. On the partner side, there's actually 3 volumes. One is what is disclosure. The volume 1 is this right for me? Volume 2 is actually the nuts and bolts preparing for the disclosure, and then volume 3 is post disclosure prep. So if people are confused, but they're both, all the books are in the Full Disclosure series, and we really try to make them accessible, like we wrote them for clients to actually write to the person preparing, and we try to provide as much support and resourcing as possible throughout the whole thing.
And they're really well done, and I will put the links in the show notes so that people can get those if those are important to them. And if someone, Dan, wanted to reach out to you and talk to you, where do they go and how do they find you?
Well, so I'll say banyantherapy.com, BANYAN therapy.com is where you can find me. I will also make a little plug at I think it's disclosureguide.com, but at Kintsugi Recovery Partners, if you search, Janice Caldwell and I've trained a number of people that do facilitate disclosures as well. So there are certain, there's people that have specialized training that, if you're looking for a guide, you don't know, where to go, that's a place that someone could go to actually get some support of someone who's been trained that kind of uses that approach.
Awesome. I will put those links in there as well. Dan, I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and share your wisdom and your voice. And thank you for all that you're doing.
Thanks, Dwayne. Appreciate you. Appreciate what you're doing. Appreciate your support.
All right. I hope this conversation with Dan Drake helped you understand why truth is the base of that pyramid of intimacy. And without honesty, you can't have safety, and you certainly can't have love and a secure relationship. But getting to that level of honesty requires resilience. If you are the one who held the secrets and you feel stuck in a cycle of self-protection and fear, I want to invite you to my 10-week Shame to Resilience workshop. We give you the tools to stop hiding and start building a legacy of truth. You can check it out at workshop.shametoresilience.com. And if you found value in this video, please hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs it. I'd really appreciate it. I'm Dwayne Osterlin. Thanks for watching.